right, we'll get started. Welcome to your monthly presentation for the IT Documentations Users Group, ITDUG. Today's presentation is project scoping, and it's twofold extra special. And I'll share with you why. I do apologize for those listening to the recording, having difficulty going on live on Facebook as security keeps changing, so we'll get that fixed for next time. But glad you are joining us. Little housekeeping. We're a small, tight-knit group. Feel free to unmute yourselves and ask questions if you have them, or post directly into the chat, and we'll get those answered. We'd much rather have a conversation about the stuff you're interested in versus just get through our slide deck. For those of you who may have found this event from a different place besides ITDUG, IT Documentation Users Group is a group of like-minded individuals who are want to know more about documenting their IT world. It's not exclusive to any one platform. And you can get to it to fb.com/group/ITDUG, or if you want to see some of our past videos and webinars, you can go to eurekaprocess.com/ITDUG. Our group was originally founded by Tracy Harden. She owns an MSP in Kentucky. She's been doing that since 2001 called Next Century Technologies. She could not make it today, but she does make a lot of these. She first founded ITDUG in 2018 because she had purchased an expensive product of IT glue and had no clue what was going on and didn't find the help she needed from them. So she started this group and started inviting other people to share notes. A little while later, she expanded it to all platforms and invited myself to be co-admin of the group and help build it so we could get more brains together, asking and answering questions. Had pretty good growth. We just broke 3,000 members a few months ago. More brains equals more answers to your questions and ideas. So please keep inviting and feel free to post questions. All of us in this room also tend to jump in and answer questions as well as best we can. Thank you to Tracy for getting this group started so many years ago. As your co-admin, just a little bit about me. Been in IT since '94. Been there, done that in the MSP world, led a few others, and started this business of Eureka Process doing processes. We do a lot of the content for ITDUG. Just looking for others has been difficult. So we're always glad to hear your ideas on other presentation topics or even people to present, even though we do have some new names in the hopper for you today, including a new name for you today. So on the next slide, introducing Brook Lee. She is a frequent participant and passionate about project scoping and probably employee onboarding as well. This is her first time leading the topic on a webinar, so wish her luck. I'm sure she'll do fabulous because she really is passionate about what she does. She's been in IT for a long time, and including the MSP space. She's been with Eureka Process as our very first employee for over 2 years now. And her and I worked together as well as a previous MSP. So we've gotten very in tune with our processes. And she actually does project management for us as well as a contractor for some of our clients. So besides knowing and helping us create the process, she is practicing this every day inside of MSPs and other IT service providers. That's why I would listen to her. So just to give you a feel for what we're doing all day long at Eureka Process, we are helping IT services firms deliver better services through processes. And we also have a community that people can join and get access to our library of processes. We are actually executing things in your tools, PSAs, documentation platforms, including IT Glue, Passportal, even some Confluence and other tools. And we are screening and helping people find the right employees for their IT services firms. All this just to show that we have a fairly wide range of experiences we're even bringing into this specific presentation today. So without further ado, I'm going to let Brook, if you would like to reintroduce yourself and introduce us to the topic of project scoping and get going.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate everybody making time in their day to come to this webinar so we can see if we can impart a little information and some help to everybody out there. Today, we are going to talk about project scoping. A successful project means we have to have careful planning. Repeating that success means that we have to have a documented process that everybody understands and follows. from sales to engineers to account managers. Everybody has to play a part in this process. Our process begins with a pretty cool spreadsheet. I call it the Magic P04.1, and that's going to help us break down the project, and we will dive into that here in a little bit. I did want to let everybody know we will email out this slideshow when we get done with this. You'll have access to all those hyperlinks that will take you straight to these templates that we have on our community site here at Eureka Process. So without further ado, let's get going. First thing we're going to do is we're going to do a super cool poll. Alan, you want to give some directions on how this is going to work, and we'll start taking some feedback.
Sure. Instructions are at the top of the screen. Swiftpolling.com, enter code 14795, and you can just vote 1 for yes, 2 for no to the question. Do you have a documented scoping process that everyone is following before you sell a project? A lot of qualifiers in there. We'll give you a second to answer. You may also text your vote to 205-883-8760. Just send that number to that phone number. 1 for yes, 2 for no. And we'll see how everybody weighs in here. So I'd like to note, we've actually given the project management webinar before, I believe even to the ITDUG group.
I think so.
Yeah, and it's a lot to project management, but the number one thing that people start digging in, that we find when we help people with project management is, all right, it all starts before the project begins when you determine what the scope of work is. And that's what Brooke's going to dive into today.
So it looks like we have a decent amount of people that have a documented process that we're following. Well, maybe not. Now it's neck and neck. We will kind of see how this shakes out. I will tell you, generally, when I go to help MSPs, when we consult with them, I will say probably an 80% average do not have a documented scoping process. It's usually just maybe the owner ballparking it. This is what we're going to come up with. This is about how long it's going to take. This is what I'm going to sell it for. But we don't really have a lot of things documented, which frequently makes projects go off the rails, as I like to call it.
40 hours sounds about right.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. And we end up with a project and it's like, sitting around 70. So that's something that I see pretty frequently. So let's dive into this and let's see how we can help everybody. So to scope or not to scope, in my book, it is not really a question. The concept of project scoping is that for a project to get completed on time and to come in on budget, the details of the project have got to be worked out before we sell the project. This means that we've got to get an engineer involved to estimate time and labor. It also needs to be clear that we have sufficient details so that the solution can be proved as well as explained and sold to a client in a meaningful way. So the scoping piece is going to answer a lot of questions that are going to affect a lot of people down the road that work within the company as well as our client. So this is why we want to make sure that we have this process in place and that everybody is following it so there's no gotchas later on. All right, it all starts with a simple spreadsheet. It is the P04.1 project scoping spreadsheet. We have this on our community site. It is a spreadsheet that we use throughout this entire process. It is not just filled out by the engineer. There are various people that throughout this entire process as it flows that are going to have parts that they are going to have to fill out. So it's an inclusive spreadsheet that multiple people are going to need to help with. So we're going to dive into that and kind of see how this goes. So I wanted to give you a quick sort of 30,000 foot overview of this process and how it goes. So how all projects pretty much start out, client wants something pretty cool. This can come from a QBR from your account manager. It can come from a conversation that a client's having with one of your engineers. But regardless of how the cool idea shows up, we've got to follow the process. First step is we're going to make a ticket in the PSA. I get some pushback on this, but we have to make the ticket. Email chains between an owner and the client or the account manager and the client. We go all this back and forth. And if we don't capture that data, we can lose some of the critical details and the thought process of what the client is thinking and wanting that we need to have in that ticket. So it helps us engineer our solution. So that's why we recommend making a ticket out of the gate. We have a couple different tabs that are going to get filled out. Sales tab, it's where your salesperson or your account manager is going to give us some information. The engineer is going to come into play, do some hardware, some estimates, some recurring things. This is going to give a complete picture to your salesperson on cost, labor, and anything else that's going to be factored in so that they can make a solid sale that they can stand behind and explained. So get that done. Project is sold. It's been scoped. We're good to go. Hand it off to the project team next. Project is going to begin. It is clear. It is understood by everybody on your project team, from your project manager all the way down. They know what to look for. They understand the spreadsheet. We are ready to rock and roll and make that project happen. Project moves along. We follow the process. It's completed on time. We come in on budget, under budget. And then at the end of the day, the client and the engineers are happy. Do not discount making your engineers happy. We are setting them up to not have fun on projects. And at the end of the day, projects are fun. It is a privilege to be on the project team. I want people to be on it. I want to make the projects fun for everybody. If we have a clear documented process, your engineers are going to be happy doing the projects because everything has been thought of and their input was considered and factored into the process. Alan, you look like you wanted to jump in there something. You got an extra?
I was just engineers, owners, salespeople, everybody's happy.
Yep. All righty. The requirements tab. This is the first tab on the spreadsheet. When you go look at the spreadsheet on our community site, and I'm going to roll through it here, please remember to look at the bottom. There are multiple tabs on the spreadsheet, not just the fun math one in the middle. There's lots of other parts and pieces that need to be filled out. The requirements tab are where this process starts. This is where your sales department kind of gets the ball moving. First thing we need to do is we're going to describe the current client technology as we have it now. What is the current setup? Do they have 2 on-prem servers? Do they have one that's a premise? They have one that's in the cloud? Do they have no servers? What does the current environment for this client look like as it sits right now today? Describe the business goals and what we're helping them accomplish. This is key to making your engineers understand, where are we trying to go with this? What is it that the client is asking us to help with? They are 5 people now. They want to grow to 20. They want to open up a second location. They want to do this within the next 4 years. What is it that the client is wanting help with that we need to figure out the plan for? Proposed solution so far. This one can be a little dicey depending on what the sales or account manager has already told the client. Regardless of what they've said, I need to have it in this document. If you told them we can go full bore cloud and we're going to have all your servers there, I need to know what you've told them so that we can figure out this solution together. Some of the account managers or the salespeople are a little more techie, so this might be a little more of a techie response than other. Or maybe I just, as the salesperson or the account manager, said, hey, a cloud solution might be a good solution for you. We'll take a look at that. So if that's what I've told the client, I want to say, I've already mentioned the cloud option, so that might be something we can look at. Again, it's just making sure that we're communicating with everybody in the process and that everybody knows what I know and what the next person knows. Fourth thing is the challenges to expect or double check. This can run the gamut. As the account manager, I'm checking in with my clients, quarterly, doing our QBRs, TBRs. Maybe I know that they have some really junkety internet and it's slow. That's going to be a factor in our solution if we're looking at a cloud-based solution, or we're looking at something that's going to be a complete web-based software application. So anything that you know that may be a challenge, maybe all of their workers are remote now and they're no longer in the office. That's a challenge, making sure that whatever information you have, you want to include it here. I'd rather have more than not enough and have you omit something. All right, next tab is our hardware tab. This is kind of the end all be all. It is a great place for the salesperson and engineer to communicate about the types of hardware and software that are going to be needed and how we're going to figure out that solution together. The engineer may say, hey, I need 3 new 48 port switches to make this project go from 5 people to 30 people in X amount of locations. On the opposite side of that, the salesperson may say, hey, the current SAN that they have, my QBR last check-in, I've noticed that that's out of warranty, so we may need to get something new in there to replace that one.
And note, they might not know prices or even manufacturer part number this time, but they can still put this information on here so it doesn't get forgotten when designing the solution and ultimately building a quote or scope of work.
Absolutely. So the salesperson's going to do the final quote, but we need to make sure that the engineer is involved so that we know the parts and pieces that we're going to need. Again, if you don't know the price, not important, but let's get it down here so we know. Also, this could be if you're doing a server out of the box. I have a couple clients that do that. So we have this on our template. It stays on there. We sell 2 servers, A and B. This is the price for each one. You're going to use the same one for this client or example. So it's a great place to keep things on there that you use over and over again as well. All right, this is the project estimate tab, and this is where the magic happens. This is my favorite part of the spreadsheet, simply because it makes things so simple when you use it. This gives you the ability to have a template that we can create, reuse, save time, and get better at selling projects and make things consistent for your engineers, for your staff, and for your clients. So we're going to dive into this a little bit closer, but I kind of wanted you to get the big picture of what is in the spreadsheet. And we're going to take a look at the parts and pieces here. All right, the header. This is usually just filled out once. Yours might be different. Again, you don't have to have all of these different engineer rates here. If you don't have that, if you charge one flat rate for all of the engineers that you have that work for you, just have one person in there. If you have different rates that you charge for different people, you want to make sure you put that in there. Trip charge, don't forget that, especially if you're doing a premise solution. Don't forget, you've got to ride out there and take the server. You got to rack it and stack it, and you got to come back. And when this is over, you got to go back again and clean up the rack and get all the stuff out and tidy up and come back. Take that into account. I've seen that numerous times. We've got a client that's an hour and a half away plus on-site time, and the next thing I know, 5 hours just evaporated from my project because we forgot to think about the travel time. I want to talk about contingency, then I'm going to let Alan sort of explain that engineer equivalent rate in just a second. Contingency is what we kind of use to pad the project with. Something may go off the rails, not go perfectly. We want to have a little bit of padding built in. We recommend 10% over nothing. You can adjust this per project. If I'm doing a really complex project, I finished up one at the end of last year. It was for a manufacturing firm. They had 4 locations across multiple states, and we did a network infrastructure upgrade. I had a 20% contingency. We were moving to a firewall that we were not familiar with. So that caused a lot of hesitation. So I thought, let me just bump this one up to 20%. That way I've kind of covered my bases. Alan, do you want to explain the engineering equivalent rate real fast?
Sure. First of all, dovetailing onto Brooks' contingency, you can change this number project to project. 10% is kind of where I start, and I consider going down if my certainty is very high, and I go up if my certainty is very low, because sometimes it's not worth doing the discovery at 4 locations or a building that doesn't exist yet. So the more unknowns, the higher I put the contingency. For you math nerds, for you Excel nerds like myself, the engineering equivalency rate is just standardizing the hours, because when I record hours into a PSA, an hour of tech time is the same as an hour of engineer time, is the same as an hour of business consulting time as far as recording hours goes. But the prices are different. Therefore, I do the engineering equivalent rate so I can show, sometimes I can show how the price is impacted by those hours, and sometimes I can show just the number of actual hours needed by that person. You might see that in the math later. If you don't have all these rates, I still recommending keeping this rough spreadsheet and math intact. Just make the rates the same, because it can be important communication when you see in the next section, when could you use a technician versus when could you use your most senior person? Because if you can preserve your most expensive salary, even if it's not a different rate for those most important tasks, that will also help your profitability.
Anybody have any questions so far? I like to pump the brakes and see if anybody's got any questions. Do we have anything in the chat, Veronica?
I don't see any in chat yet, and no one's hand is raised or no microphones are muted. But please feel free to chime in anytime, and I will follow
anytime. Just interrupt. I love answering questions, so don't worry about it. We will stop and answer questions along the way. So, alrighty, let's dive into the phases and the basics. Phase 1, most of us are using some sort of a ticket to scope out the project. We want to pull that in. The phase 1 is often overlooked for a couple of reasons. A, we want to pull in that scoping document, the ticket, because it has critical details in it, and we want to know how long did it take us to scope this particular solution. The second thing is project management. Someone has to manage this project, whether it's a super easy, quick O365 migration, or it's a nasty big boy, we're migrating 3 servers projects. Someone has to manage this project. We need to account for that time. It costs us money to do that. We have to have client kickoffs. We have to have weekly Zoom meetings. We have to have internal team meetings. All of those things take time and labor, and we want to make sure we're accounting for those hours in our spreadsheet when we sell this solution. The middle phases are where our engineers, and you can have phase 2, 3, 4, et cetera, is where our engineers are going to break this project into logical steps. It doesn't need to be a click by click kind of thing, but we want to have general milestones. So for phase 2, if I'm doing a big server migration, this may be the prep phase. I have clients that build their own servers based on client needs and specifications. So I may have, prep server, load OS, deliver server to the rack. So I may have a prep phase that just includes those pieces. And then you can also have a migration phase. Maybe that phase, I've got some of the steps. We're going to migrate the data. We're going to migrate the printers. We're going to do something with the file server. So we kind of want to have those broken out into those various parts and pieces. This is also a great place, as Alan mentioned before, to think about who you can get to do something. Do you really need your most expensive engineer to take the server and rack and stack it? Or can I get a tier 1 engineer or maybe a field tech to do that for me? Putting the server together, putting in the RAM and the drives and everything else. Does our T3 really need to do that? Or can we get one of our other guys that do our computer preps to do that for us? So think about the labor and the cost and where you can sort of make some adjustments on that end.
Probably the most common question I get is really, how do I know which is the new milestone, aka which is the new ticket in certain project systems? And there's not always a clear answer. It's up to you. One way to look at it, especially if you're breaking up who or what skill level could do which, if a different skill level can do it, it's probably a different milestone. Likewise, if there's a logical conclusion point where it could be wrapped up with a bow and handed to somebody else, even if it's the same person doing it, another great milestone. One thing probably not great in our example too is that notes field often to the right should include those little techie details from an engineer on why did they give this number? What are the basic steps involved? Again, we don't want click by click.
We also can use those. I do when I do projects, whatever the engineer puts in the notes field, I will put that in the internal section of our PSA. Sometimes it's just a reminder for them when they're scoping this out. They put some sort of note over there about whatever it is that we're going to do and why we're going to do it. So I will put that in the ticket for them in an internal place for them to view, to kind of jog their memory on why it's there to be helpful.
And then my favorite secret weapon is that gave estimate column 2 there.
Yeah, who's the person that told me this?
Because, I mean, depending on what the service is, I may be getting different estimates, and I like to just manage my people, manage my project. So if somebody gave me a really poor estimate, I want to go talk to them like, hey, this is what you estimated. This is what actually happened. Is this something we should improve in the future? Did we just do it poorly? Did we not communicate what your thoughts were to make that better and better?
Alrighty, final phase. Again, like phase 1, we do not want to forget this phase. This right here is where hidden costs creep in if we forget to do this. We always recommend planning to have a resource reserved, dedicated to the project for the day after we've done something large, like the migration, the cut day, the install day. I put in the new firewall Friday night. Somebody needs to be ready to rock and roll Monday morning to help with that. This person can be a remote resource depending on the project and your clients, also can be an on-site person as well. This person will help handle complaints. It helps make sure that your client is, I call it, feeling the love. They feel that you're paying attention to them. You're making sure that everything that they need is handled. If there's any sort of blips or speed bumps, you've got somebody ready to go to help them and get that person back to work. At the end of the day, the projects are meant to help. And so we want to ensure that we have somebody sitting on the go to fix anything that may have cropped up so that they're not being hindered by the project that we've put into place. Another thing, I was kind of going through this morning. If you're not sure about how long of a time frame you want to get, how many hours, I recommend going back into your PSA for the last time you did a project and pulling up trouble tickets from that day after. I had a client do that. They did an O365 migration. They told me it went great. Went back and looked at the day after and found about 27 help desk tickets where it didn't go so great. So, we kind of totaled those up and came up with an average amount of time. And then we now factor that in there. Again, it's an O365, but it's new for people. So you just want to make sure, like I said, that the clients are feeling that you're ready for them to handle any problems so that they can get back to work. This really helps with the customer service delivery. You're muted, Alan.
Sorry. Also keep in mind for the final phase and phase one, the things that we typically forget. If you don't know what to quote here, quoting anything is better than you were doing before. So even if you just want to throw an hour in there to start this process, start maybe recording your time against this ticket to improve it in the future, that's a great start. Start somewhere.
Another thing, this is ITDUG group documentation. You should have a documentation ticket on every single project that you do. Minimum of 1 hour, depending on what you're doing. If it's a small project, maybe it can be 30 minutes. Somebody needs to go into whatever your documentation platform is and update the documentation. If they no longer have a physical server, mark things inactive. That is the kiss of death when you do a project and we don't update the documentation. And then I've got help desk people trying to field questions and we don't have the documentation for them to fall back on. They still think that we have a physical server because we didn't update IT Glue. They're not on the project team. They're not really sure what's happening. In IT Glue, we use that one frequently. I update the site summary. Maybe I've got like a little blurb at the top that I'll run for a month that says, hey, this client just got cool new stuff XYZ. Make sure that you're looking at the SOP for that when you're doing this. So strongly recommend having the documentation ticket in there. Do not let it go and make sure you're following up behind people as well. So we want to make sure we get that piece captured.
Now, of course, documentation should be a part of every ticket. Without a separate phase. But when it comes to projects, I always have some sort of documentation wrap up to make sure those things were documented as we go and that everything's been cleaned up like Brooke stated.
Do we have questions? I see a 2 blinking.
Oh my gosh, we do. All right, I'm just going to read Peter's comment because I haven't had a chance to digest it yet. A number of projects for existing customers are unknown territory. That's true. And I'll be far more general and tell them that it'll be based hourly and it should take X days. These are for new projects we've never done before. Existing customers always trust me as my estimates are usually fairly accurate. Does this mean I'm bad at project management? I can never argue with results, first of all, Peter. There is, just like with documentation, there is an ROI for your effort that is multiplied by the number of people following it. I hear this argument a lot. I joke about 40 hours because almost every server migration that we've walked into, somehow, typically the owner's like, oh, about 40 hours. And you win some, you lose some. And every now and then you forgot to check this detail. So you do have to ask, is it worth it? And maybe it's not always worth it. I will argue as you're growing, it becomes more and more valuable. The more people you have to communicate with, the more projects that you do. As an owner, I could spend 3 hours figuring out the scoping process or an hour making a great guess. I've just saved 2 hours of time and made the sale. Congratulations. Are you recording all your time against the project in some form or fashion? Meaning, do you actually know that you saved that 2 hours, or did that bit of laziness, I hope that is not a direct attack, that bit of time savings, did you actually save 2 hours, or did it end up costing you 8 hours on the project side? And yes, you might be really good at this and doing a great job, and at your size, it might be the right solution for you now. But this is where you mature and grow as you start managing more different types of resources. Brooke, did you want to add to that?
I do. Even if you're selling something at T&M, time and materials, and you're not doing this, hey, I'm going to sell this project for $7,800, you should still fill out the scoping spreadsheet. I still need to know the parts and pieces that are going to happen. Even if I'm selling it at T&M and we're doing it by the hour, we still need to have it scoped out and use the spreadsheet so that it's clear to everybody what's happening, including the client and whoever you're giving this off to. If you're doing the project management yourself, that's great. But if somebody wants to look at the project and see what's going on, we need to have all those parts and pieces and phases in there. So even if you're doing T&M, I still recommend that you do the scoping process.
So Peter, thank you for the question and the challenge.
Awesome question. Thank you. What else we got?
Nothing else yet.
Okay. Let's move on here. All right, bottom part, subtotals and totals. This is sort of the breakdown, shows the engineer equivalent hours, which is the conversion that Alan talked about earlier. We also have our mileage on here. We've also got our contingency in here as well. So that sort of gives us the grand total of what we think this project is going to cost labor-wise. This is exclusive of, it does not have the hardware in there. It does not have any software licensing in there, any recurring costs, etc. This is just what it's going to take us in man hours, heavy lifting to make this thing happen.
And I'll explain those engineering equivalent hours one more time
Yes.
now that we see the totals. So at this point in the spreadsheet, this is not a 46.85 hour project. That is not what this says. This is me just doing some strange math to come up with a dollar amount. Your actual hours is up above at the bottom of the spreadsheet with all the phases summed up. There you can see the actual number of hours per everything, per phase, per technician role, technician engineer, business manager, etc. So those hours up in the rows and the phases and the tickets and the tasks, those are ready to be imported or typed in as is into whatever your project management system is by the hour. But this bottom piece just does some math to get it to the dollar. And I will add, Brooke, you're probably going to cover this. I hope I didn't steal your thunder. For so many owner salespeople, they have the power to guess, to say, they'll never pay that. I'm going to sell it for less.
That's coming up.
Oh, I'll be quiet. I'll let Brooke do it. Be prepared.
Yeah. All right. Next tab we need to talk about is our recurring tab. This can be the sticker shock tab if we are not prepared to let our clients know what's going to change. If they are going to incur any sort of a recurring monthly charge in addition to what they're already paying you for their regular MSP services, we want to be 100% transparent, honest, and upfront about it. The last thing I want to do is do an O365 migration, forget to tell them that I'm now doing regular Skykick monthly backups, and they start getting a bill and they don't understand it. They're like, oh my gosh, I already paid for my project. Why am I getting this? We want to make sure any changes that are going to be recurring monthly for them, that we let them know about that out of the gate, so that again, we're completely honest and transparent about these charges. It can be cloud services, backup changes. Maybe we're going to have to back up more data, any sort of things like that. We want to make sure we document that here.
And sometimes asking the engineer to think about this question also makes them remember steps they forgot in the previous tab.
Okie doke, benefits tab. This is similar to what we asked the salesperson to do at the beginning. Hey, what is the client trying to accomplish? What have you kind of already told them? This is where we're asking the engineer to fill out some questions for us. This is going to make it easier to us be able to sell the project to the client and explain the why of we are telling them this is the best solution for them. First part, we want to describe how the solution benefits the client. You can put this in semi-technical terms, but remember, you're going to pass this off to a salesperson who is going to make a client-facing quote. So what can we do to help explain it in regular people terms? This is why the solution is going to be awesome for you, and this is how it's going to work. How does it address their needs and challenges? If we're engineering a solution to fix something that's broken or not working right, let's make sure we document that here. Again, this is going to make it easy to sell if we document this out. It's going to be less questions from the client because we've addressed everything in the quote. And when we make that phone call or that Zoom to explain it with them, everything is cut and dry. It's very easy for everybody to see, and it doesn't look like we're doing some cool whatever behind the curtain. Last thing, this one's a tricky one. Are there alternative solutions that we should look into if we're unable to sell this? Tell them why. A lot of times I will have scopes where we get a client that thinks they're really tech savvy and they're asking us, well, why did y'all not tell me about X, Y, and Z? I Googled it and saw that we could do this over here for X amount of dollars. If a client's wanting to move, I want to go full cloud. Okay. I know you asked for full cloud. We're recommending a prem solution. And this is why, because if you go full cloud, you have 27 servers and all this data. And this is how much it's going to cost you per month, in addition to what you're already paying now for your MSP services. So we kind of want to head that stuff off at the pass. And it also shows them that we've thought about alternate solutions and why we are not recommending them. Again, a really good way to show a client that you're more than just some sort of an outsourced vendor. You're a partner with them, and you're thinking about this client and what they can do and can't do, and this is what I'm presenting to you as the solution and why.
Yeah, and this part is tricky because we don't want to spend hours and hours and hours looking at alternatives. But if a technician had a thought, common example, cloud versus prem, make a note like, hey, we didn't do premise because there's no need, or we didn't do cloud because of storage concerns. Give some credence to the other possible solutions.
All right, how it all comes together. So these phases with these line items and all these hours are what's going to allow us to create a project, to give our client the document to be able to sell it, the salesperson, the engineers, all the owners, everybody's going to have the clarity that they need to ensure a project is successful for everyone. So this is why we do this. It all comes together. Everybody had input on it, and it's going to give people the clarity that they need. Frequent questions and concerns. These are questions I get from clients, pushback, etc. The first thing we're going to start with is the big one. Should we charge for scoping? My answer, it depends. It depends on your clients. It depends on the operational maturity of your company. And it honestly depends on time versus reward, or the ROI that Alan was talking about earlier. Regardless of whether we charge or don't charge for the scope, we do recommend that you pull in those hours to the project to reflect the time that it took to engineer the solution. So even if you're not going to charge for it, we still need to capture that time. I have a particular client, they sell all of their scopes. They charge 6 to 8 hours for the scope. If their premise thinking is if the client's not willing to invest 6 to 8 hours for me to engineer a solution, they're 100% not going to be willing to bite the bullet and pay for a $6,000 server migration. So that's sort of their thinking. So I just wanted to kind of bring that out there so that you can think about it. Again, got a lot of different parts and pieces on how you're going to determine that. Second question I get, how do we know what needs to be scoped versus what just needs to be a regular, I call them plain vanilla bean ticket? You need to think about, is this something that's out of your wheelhouse, or is it something that's not like a regular ticket that you do? A good example is a client wants to install some software so they can share documents throughout the company. That's going to need a scope. We're going to have to come up with some sort of solution for that, whether it's SharePoint or something else. A client calls in and they want to upgrade QuickBooks to the latest version. That is normally covered under agreement. That's not going to be a project. You're just doing a simple software upgrade. So just kind of think about, is this something that we normally do on a day-to-day basis, or is this something we need to take a step back and look at because this sounds like it's not something we regularly do, or the client is asking for something that's not in our wheelhouse.
Hey, Brooke, does this also equate to our definition of what is a project versus what is a ticket?
Not exactly, because a project is, our process defines a project as anything that is more than 6 hours or has multiple moving parts in it. I have had what we would consider a project maybe time-wise, but I do it on a ticket. If it's just a firewall installation, I generally will not do a project for that. We work off of a ticket with tasks. But if I'm doing a firewall install along with some WAPs, or it's got multiple locations and I got to create some new VLANs and things like that, that's a little bit bigger out of the wheelhouse, I will do a project for that. Again, it kind of depends on your staff and your maturity and where you're at. If you're not sure, I would say err on the side of caution and make a project just to make sure that you have all of the parts and pieces in there so that we don't forget anything. This one particular client, they're pretty far along in their maturity, so the firewall installs, preps and installs are fairly commonplace there.
What I find is pretty common too is, as you develop your various processes, and when you figure out projects and it's actually working like a well-oiled machine, you tend to err toward putting things on projects because you know it's going to get done. Unless your service team is actually the well-oiled machine, then it tends to go the opposite direction. So now you can tell which one's best done.
Another pushback I get is the spreadsheet has too much stuff for me to fill out. I don't really care. I need you to fill out the spreadsheet because the details are what it's going to take to get this done. And the spreadsheet to be filled out, again, as you saw earlier, there's various people that are helping along with this process. The engineers are a lot where I get the pushback. They don't want to fill out the spreadsheet. But again, it makes the success of a project reproducible. So because we have this template and we're following this process, it makes it easier for everybody, and it sets everybody up for success, your project team as well as the salespeople and the client. So They kind of cry about it a little bit in the beginning, but everybody kind of gets on board and gets used to it. Also, you're able to make templates for projects that you do over and over again, where you're just changing the quantity of the users or the machines or whatever. So it saves a lot of time down the road. So I recommend filling out the spreadsheet anyway. The last one, my favorite one, price versus hours. So this is what Alan alluded to earlier. If I scope out a project and I tell you it's going to take 50 hours for me to get this done, and my estimate on that particular tab says it's going to take me $7,000 to make it happen. Have everything got wrapped up in a nice little bow. I give it to the sales guy, account manager, and they come knocking on my door and they're like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I can't sell this $7,000 project. My response is, what you need to do to sell the project is a different conversation than the hours it is going to take me to complete this project. If I go to Alan and Alan's the owner and he's like, Brooke, you have lost it. I cannot sell this for $7,000. I'm going to sell it for $5,000. Okay, party on. You sell that thing for $5,000 and make it happen. However, my 50 hours is not going to change. It is still going to take me 50 hours to finish that project. That is the estimate that I gave you. The hours will not change no matter what you do. You can change what you sell it for. You cannot reduce the amount of hours. That is something I want to be extremely clear about, because I have this at every single place that I go help. The salespeople come back, hey, can you get this done in 10 hours? No, I cannot. I can get it done in 20. You can sell it for a 10-hour project. I am still going to have to use my 20 hours to make this happen.
This is not condoning changing prices or discounting projects. It's just recognizing it's a separate conversation, because a scope should be what it is. You can't talk somebody into working faster or working better.
Do we have another question or no? I've got another orange blinker up there. Okay.
That's me being all chatty.
Okay. All right. Everybody's turn now. Who has questions? Unmute yourself. Shoot whatever questions you got. We've got Adam, Veronica, Alan, myself in here. Between the four of us, we can cover just about anything. Who wants clarification or just wants to talk about something that you got going on? We'll see if we can give you a shove in the right direction.
Yep. A shove. Thanks, Brooke. I do have one strategy to share that you've done before on how to get started. Because like you said, there's a lot of detail. There's a lot to ask somebody to suddenly start using this process. And I think what helps make that decision, what turns that ship, is actually measuring the results. How much time are you actually spending? And Brooke, I've seen you do this several times, getting clients convinced to do it this way. And that's creating a scope after the fact. Don't recommend it. I don't like it. But if a project was sold, we can still spend the time to create the scope, just so that we can organize the resources and start recording the right tickets with the right hours to understand where our time is going for the future. And that's a great
had
way
a
of
client that was selling O365 migrations at a certain price because he was, convinced it only took X amount of hours. So we did a couple of projects. I had to back into that, and I completed the scope document after the fact. And we realized that it wasn't taking the amount of hours that he thought. It was about another 30% more. So we were losing money on every single one of those projects. Once we showed him the scoping document, he was like, oh my gosh, I need to go back and make sure that I'm showing the client, these are all the things that we have to do, and this is why it costs this much. So that one thing is now why their O365 migrations are turning a profit instead of losing money. They didn't even realize it until we started filling this out.
And I noticed clients were complaining about the price of the extra 30%. You're a trusted vendor, and they trust you to actually know how long this stuff takes and how much it costs to do it. So give them the right price. All right. Feel free to keep submitting questions, but if we don't have any more, we'll go ahead and do our end of meeting housekeeping.
Yep.
I have no problem coming back and opening up to more questions. If you think of some, please throw them in the chat, throw your hand up in Zoom, or just unmute and start going for it. Next month, hey, somebody not Eureka Process, Dave Sobel. I don't know if you know him. He has a couple things going on. My favorites, his podcast, The Business of Tech. He speaks very industry-wide and very future. What we've decided to do is to bring him and talk to you guys about that, with the only caveat being, hey, don't forget, we're talking to an audience of people who are more concerned about documentation of IT. I know he's got some hot buttons right now regarding compliance and maybe some touch points and documentation, but in general, it should just be a lively conversation about the type of stuff you don't typically get to hear. And even better, he has nothing left to sell you. He just owns a free podcast. So feel free to check him out ahead of time or come see him May 26th, where we're going to compare notes, challenge each other, maybe argue and cry a little bit, and open up to questions. If you would like more information about this type of thing or more processes, you can find us at eurekaprocess.com. There's a free consultation button at the bottom right. You can find more about all of our bios and see some of our past videos as well. We also have a community site, theeurekacommunity.com, that has about 200 templated processes and ideas and videos, ideas you can put into your business, including all of our project processes in the spreadsheet itself available for download. You may contact me directly at eurekaprocess.com or the number on your screen. I do kind of freak out when the phone rings. It just doesn't happen these days. I don't know. It's a weird world. And for those of you not already at ITDUG, as I said in the beginning, it's just search facebook.com for our short tag ITDUG. And you can find all the past articles or webinars for ITDUG at our website as well. Is that the end?
That is.
All right, we'll spend 5 more seconds waiting for any more questions to pop up or somebody to unmute. Bruno, thanks for your feedback.
Alan, I was going to give some feedback on something that me
Awesome.
and Brooke have worked on, and that's this is something Peter alluded to. He's saying my customers trust me to give them a good estimate and it's fairly accurate. Setting up the scoping document and filling it out so you know the budget of your project will tell you later on, once your project is complete, that it is actually accurate and that project is profitable, or what your effective rate actually was. So you budgeted 50 hours and it was 60 hours. So your effective rate for that project actually went down, and it's not your normal billable rate. That's something that we measure as well as project profitability to see how accurate that actually is. So setting up a scoping document in the front gives you that budget, and then you know actually that that's true at the end.
That's actually my a principle we have at Eureka Process. A lot of our breakthroughs with clients are the moment we define a KPI, a key performance indicator or a metric, like Adam mentioned, effective rate. And we can get into the details about what that is. It is one of my favorite things to measure for a project. The short story is it's how much are you earning per hour compared to what you would normally charge hourly. And I don't mind it not being an even 1.0, our normal hourly rate, but you should know. The very process of trying to measure that means you have to know how much did you sell it for, how much did you spend, and that exercise alone is invaluable before you even get into the trying to improve that number. So the measurement itself has extreme power. And there's an entire E-rate document too in the community site. Other questions or comments? How about for you, Adam? Do you have questions? All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending. It is our pleasure to do this for you. We hope to see you inside of ITDUG here and there. And worst case, see you May 26th for Dave Sobel. Have a good one, guys.
Bye.